again, and welcome to the Medieval World Podcast. In the last lecture, we looked at the Black Death and the social, economic, political, and religious effects that it had on Western Europe. In this lecture, I want to continue with this same theme of major changes that happened in Western Europe, and we're going to focus now on the papacy. And this major change is known as the Western Schism. Now, if you remember from a few lectures ago, I talked about the Avignon papacy, a period of papal history in which the popes resided not in Rome, but in France. And while the popes resided in France, they were primarily French popes, by which I mean that the popes were born, raised, and primarily functioned in the Kingdom of France, as opposed to the majority of popes which came out of Italy and the major Italian noble families. The Western Schism begins in 1378 and does not end until 1417, and it is probably one of the most important papal events during the Middle Ages. It is a period in which we see, for the majority of it, really two popes, one in Avignon and one in Italy, in Rome, and for the last few years of it, a third pope all at the same time, and this pope's going to be in Pisa. We'll get to that in a minute. What you need to understand about the Western Schism is not necessarily all of the popes in order in each respective area. This is fruitless and kind of pointless for a general discussion. What you should understand from a discussion of the Western Schism is really the central causes of it and the results of it. What were the major effects? They are going to be very, very lasting. So, what was the Western Schism? Well, by about 1378, the major Italian bishops, the cardinals in Italy, had grown tired of the papacy being in Avignon, France. And in 1378, they decide to not recognize the French pope, who is going to be in Avignon, France, and instead decide to elect their own pope. And this kicks off the Western Schism. And all this is going to happen beginning in 1378 after Pope Gregory XI dies. And here's where the popes get a bit complicated. For reasons that I'll explain in a little bit, there are going to be popes that have the same name and the same numbers that are side by side in this list. And the reason for that is because the ones who came first with the same name and number are actually deleted officially from papal registries, which means they are declared what we officially call them as anti-popes. So, for example, if there is a Gregory the 12th and he is declared an anti-pope, he actually wasn't, and later on there becomes another Pope Gregory, that Pope Gregory is not Pope Gregory the 13th, but instead takes the title Pope Gregory the 12th, officially erasing the previous Gregory from the papal records. I hope that makes sense. That's the best I can do at explaining popes and anti-popes. So, what happens when the popes in Rome elect their own bishop? Well, it starts off a schism. Now, the Catholic Church had had multiple popes many, many times before. These are called schisms. They're normal. They're not preferred, obviously, but it would oftentimes happen when the bishops elected a pope and the Holy Roman Emperor, before Gregory VII, chose a pope as well. And when these two political factions chose opposing popes, you had a schism. What makes the Western Schism unique is the length at which it lasts. This is going to last from, like I said, 1378 to really 1417 until there's finally a major resolution. And that's going to be what? In a roughly 40-year window. This is a very, very long schism. But it's also important because of what happens towards the end of the Western Schism. Now, the Italian bishops recognize that this is creating a major problem for the papacy. It's creating a difficulty. It's basically dividing all of the church, and it's also dividing Western Europe, because England and France, who are fighting their 100 Years' War at this time, are going to pick different sides. The French kings are going to pick the Avignon papacy, naturally, and the English are going to side with the Roman papacy. The Scottish are going to side with the Avignon papacy because they're against the English, and it basically just, the schism is almost like a proxy war for the 100 Years' War, taking place on a religious level, an ecclesiastical level. So the Italian bishops recognize this, and they hold a council of Pisa. And at this council of Pisa, they decide to elect a new pope that everyone is going to recognize. And this takes place in 1409. And at the council of Pisa, they decide that this new pope that they elect is going to be recognized by everyone in Western Europe, and it's going to resolve the Western Schism. We're going to basically dethrone the Avignon popes and dethrone the Rome popes, and everyone can get past this. However, this does not work. The 1409 Pisa resolution essentially just creates a third pope. Neither the Avignon pope nor the Roman pope decide to recognize anyone else. And so you have a period of really another 5 years in which you have 3 popes all functioning at the same time. This is eventually going to be resolved at the Council of Constance in 1414. At the Council of Constance, all the bishops come together and they agree that this has gotten out of hand. Gregory the 12th, who was the Roman bishop Roman pope at the time, he agrees. At the Council of Constance in 1414, Gregory the 12th, he says, I will personally resign if you only, under one condition, recognize all the popes of Rome since 1378 as legitimate popes. And you say that all those in Avignon from 1378 to 1414 and all those in Pisa from 1409 to 1414 are heretical anti-popes. And the Council of Constance agrees to this. And so Gregory the 12th steps down, and essentially after another period of a little bit of time, the council elects Pope Martin V, who officially comes to the papal crown in 1417. Why is this event significant? It is significant because a pope does not resign again until Benedict in the 21st century, which we just saw a few years ago. There are not a lot of popes who resign, and the two that I can think of are Gregory the 12th and Benedict, who resigned, like I said, a few years ago. And if you studied the history of Benedict, you'll know that during the days before his resignation, he actually went to the tomb of Gregory the 12th and prayed to him on a regular basis because he knew the history and the importance of what he was doing. So this is one reason why the Western Schism is important, because of its modern connections. The other reason why the Western Schism is important is because of what it does to the church. Even though the Council of Constance resolves the Western Schism, an anti-pope named John the 23rd, is going to continue trying to declare himself pope. Eventually he is chased out of town, and by 1417 the Western Schism is completely over. Even though the Western Schism is completely ended by the Council of Constance, it doesn't resolve the major issue that it created, which is the fact that it has created a giant blemish on the Catholic Church. They look like a laughing stock. Why is this important? Well, when it comes time for the Protestant Reformation in just a couple decades, it is going to be very easy to criticize the Catholic Church, not only because of their issues including simony, nepotism, the selling of indulgences, general corruption, but also because they are so haphazard and poorly organized that they had a schism for essentially 4 decades. The Western Schism and the blemish that it creates for the Catholic Church creates a problem that is going to indirectly lead to the Protestant Reformation, or at least provide fuel for it. And this is the major takeaway from the Western Schism, is that it's laying the groundwork necessary for a Protestant Reformation.